The party leader, Kenichi, looks down on our boy Hirotaka with a smug grin. The words hit him like a physical blow, leaving him utterly stunned. He asks for an explanation, only to be told he's useless to the team. This, after they were all summoned to this world as heroes to defeat the Demon King. But as the tavern patrons whisper, Hirotaka realizes this isn't a joke. Kenichi laughs, mocking his unique skill, garbage picking. A flicker of defiance crosses Hirotaka's face as he reaches out his hand, channeling a strange energy that begins to glow around his fingers. A bright light gathers in the center of his palm, and from it, a small potion bottle materializes out of thin air. His skill, garbage picking, allows him to randomly recover items discarded in this world. But his former teammates just stare back with utter disdain. The rest of the tavern patrons seem to share their sentiment. Hirotaka, however, is ecstatic, declaring it a lucky pull. His excitement is met with a wave of derisive laughter from the crowd. Kenichi scoffs, pointing out that a single potion is worthless to a party with healers. He then twists the knife, mocking Hirotaka for his age and dependency. But Hirotaka fires back, insisting he's only 17 in this new world. Their cruel words rain down on him, calling him a useless disgrace, and the sheer weight of their rejection leaves him completely stunned. He asks them why they have to go so far, his voice trembling. But then, a fire ignites in his eyes as he declares he doesn't need them anyway. Kenichi adds one last insult, demanding he return the equipment they graciously lent him. The final blow lands, leaving Hirotaka utterly speechless. The party leader offers a parting, condescending sneer. But something in Hirotaka snaps and he grabs his bags of collected junk, shouting that they can't have it. He makes a clumsy escape, tumbling down the stairs with his precious garbage. From outside the door, he yells one last accusation at his former comrades. His defiant exit is met with yet another round of laughter from everyone inside. Alone and humiliated, he can only vent his frustration at the empty night. He sits alone on the steps, forced to admit he was useless to them. It's a simple truth of the world. What's no longer wanted is simply thrown away. His mind flashes back to his old life, where he worked as a junk collector. While clearing out a house, he notices a small item among the discarded furniture. A lonely teddy bear, worn and forgotten. The homeowner approaches, explaining the toy was mixed in by mistake, but she tells him to dispose of it anyway, since they no longer have a use for it. Her daughter, meanwhile, happily hugs her brand-new stuffed animal. Hirotaka is left holding the old bear, a profound sadness in his eyes. And as the truck drives away, the toy is left to face its fate alone. He thinks that feeling lonely for such things must make him the strange one. Now, sitting on the cold pavement, he wonders what he's supposed to do. Abandoned by his comrades, he's utterly alone in this new world. They took his equipment and his money, leaving him with only his collected junk. Faced with such a dire situation, a wry smile begins to form. One that speaks of a newfound quiet determination. He decides there's no point dwelling on it. He'll show them the true power of a junk collector. With renewed purpose, he opens up his bags, laying out his materials to take stock of what he is. He picks up a worn gauntlet, wondering about the life of its previous owner. He imagines it belonged to an adventurer who saw many incredible sights. He even notices the faint, dark stains of old battles. To Hirotaka, even if something is thrown away, no matter how old or worn it becomes, every single piece of junk holds a story that can't be erased. Kenichi may have mocked him, but our boy is genuinely glad he received this skill. As a new day dawns over the city, he finds his way to a local item shop. He enters with his bags of junk, hoping to sell what he's collected. At the counter, he asks the shopkeeper if he'll buy items other than potions. The shopkeeper peers into the bag, his expression shifting to one of surprise. But his hope is shattered when the man angrily refuses to buy such garbage. Hirotaka fires back, arguing that calling it garbage is just a biased assumption. The shopkeeper's tone changes as he examines a piece, asking if Hirotaka dismantled it himself. Our boy confirms, explaining he broke it down to make the materials easier to reuse. The man seems impressed, noting that dismantling gear requires both strength and knowledge. He's surprised someone so young could do it, unaware of Hirotaka's true age. Changing his mind completely, he offers to buy the whole lot for 6 silver coins. Overjoyed by this small victory, Hirotaka can barely contain his gratitude. He steps back out onto the street, his first successful transaction complete. He watches the bustling city streets, a new path laid out before him. A smile spreads across his face as he realizes he can live here by collecting junk. In fact, without a boss or quotas, this life might be even better than his last. But just as quickly as the hope arrived, a sobering thought hits him. His unique skill can only be used once every 12 hours, which isn't enough to survive on. With such a long cooldown and the randomness of his pulls, he starts to doubt himself all over again. To make ends meet, he heads into the forest to gather medicinal herbs to sell. But as he works, a sudden rustling in the bushes makes him freeze. A small white creature with curious eyes peeks out from the undergrowth. Forgetting his troubles for a moment, Hirotaka can't help but smile at the cute sight. But the cute creature was just a prelude to a far more terrifying sight. A pack of monstrous rats bursts from the foliage, sending Hirotaka into a blind panic. He runs for his life, realizing he'd completely forgotten about monsters in this world. Having always relied on his former party, he is now completely defenseless. But just as despair begins to set in, a sudden realization hits him. In the nick of time, his skill's 12-hour cooldown is finally over. He desperately prays for a weapon, anything that can help him fight back. Reaching out his hand, he activates his garbage-picking skill. His eyes are wide with a mixture of hope and terror, and in a burst of dark energy, something materializes on the ground before him. His eyes widen as the dark energy swirls before him. It begins to coalesce and take a solid shape, forming into the hilt of a weapon in his hand. He stares in disbelief at the strange, ornate dagger he now holds. He has no idea what it is, but there's no time to think. The monstrous rats are closing in, ready to pounce. With a desperate cry, Hirotaka swings the blade wildly, but instead of a simple slash, the dagger unleashes a volley of dark projectiles. The shadowy spikes impale the rats, pinning them to the ground in an instant. The surviving monsters turn and flee in terror, leaving Hirotaka standing amidst the aftermath. He lets out a shaky breath, realizing he's actually safe. He marvels at the dagger's incredible power, remembering it's just another piece of discarded junk. He examines the weapon's strange, almost unsettling design. A profound thought crosses his mind as he stares at the blade. With a grateful smile, he thanks the dagger for saving his life, though he can't help but admit its appearance is a little creepy. Looking at the fallen monsters, he suddenly realizes they're a source of materials he can sell. A coin drops from one of the rats, a clear sign of unexpected income. Feeling his luck has turned, he happily gathers his spoils. But his cheerful moment is cut short by a sudden, piercing scream. He freezes, the sound of a scream echoing through the trees. His first thought is that someone needs to get an adult. Then it dawns on him that he's the only adult around. He rushes toward the sound to find a young girl cornered by a monstrous bear. She's frozen in fear, barely able to warn the beast to stay back. But the creature's eyes glow with an unrelenting fury. It lets out a terrifying roar and lunges forward to attack. But just in the nick of time, Hirotaka throws himself between them. The girl can only stare in stunned disbelief at her sudden rescuer. He flashes a relieved smile, glad that he made it. But his heroic moment is cut short as the bear's paw connects with his face. The sheer force of the blow sends him flying through the air. He lands in a heap, completely stunned by the monster's overwhelming power. This is no ordinary bear. Its single glowing eye promises nothing but destruction. The young girl watches in horror as her newfound protector is taken down in a single hit. The beast turns its attention back to its original target, ignoring the fallen Hirotaka. From the ground, our boy can only watch, paralyzed by the sudden turn of events. The girl's hope vanishes, replaced by a desperate plea for someone to save her. But finding a spark of courage, she raises her staff to face the monster herself. The strange orb at its tip begins to tremble and glow with a faint magical energy. But her resolve shatters in an instant, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. She realizes with dawning horror that it's always like this for her. Whenever it truly matters, her magic fails, leaving her a burden to everyone she tries to help. Memories of past failures flash through her mind, each one a painful reminder of her inadequacy. Now she's dragged a stranger into her mess and she can only see herself as useless garbage, but a voice cuts through her despair, telling her everything will be all right. It's Hirotaka, forcing himself back to his feet and promising he'll handle it. The girl can only stare, completely bewildered by his sudden recovery. Though still on the ground, a new plan is forming in Hirotaka's mind. His hand closes around the hilt of the strange dagger he'd found earlier. With a defiant roar, he pushes back against the beast, declaring that his life as a junk collector gave him more strength than it knows. He shoves the monster's massive arm away with surprising force. The bear seems taken aback for just a moment. Before its eye glows with an even greater rage, it lunges forward, sinking its teeth deep into Hirotaka's arm. Realizing his strength alone won't be enough, he switches to his only weapon. He drives the strange dagger into the monster's side with all his might. The beast's eye widens in a flash of pain and surprise, but Hirotaka realizes with dread that the wound was far too shallow. He realizes he'll have to keep stabbing it until he lands a fatal blow, but the dagger is just too small. If only he had a weapon with a little more reach. But then the strange hilt begins to squirm in his hand. He can only stare in utter disbelief at the transformation. The blade begins to extend, growing longer and longer. His mind struggles to process what's happening as the dagger becomes a sword, and not just any sword, but a grotesque blade covered in unsettling, living eyes. But his moment of shock is cut short as the enraged bear lunges once more. With no time to think, Hirotaka swings the new blade with all his might. The grotesque sword carves through the monster's side with terrifying ease. The monster falls in 2 clean pieces, cut down by a single, impossible strike. The young girl can only watch, her mind unable to process what just happened. She whispers in absolute awe at the incredible display of power. Hirotaka himself is just as stunned, staring at the weapon in his hand. He can't believe he just sliced a massive bear in half with one swing. He examines the blade, realizing it not only changed shape, but seems to be looking right back at him. He can't help but think this is one seriously dangerous sword. But his fear is quickly replaced by pure, childish glee over how cool his new weapon is. He holds the blade close, asking it just what kind of weapon it is. And in response, the sword seems to pulse with a dark, unsettling energy. The sudden surge of energy leaves him completely stunned. Before his eyes, the dark aura coalesces into strange, glowing text. It's a status screen, revealing the weapon's name, level, and skills. He reads the name aloud, Demon Sword Osoro, just as the young girl speaks up. She offers a heartfelt, if somewhat flustered, thank you for saving her life. He quickly dismisses her apology, insisting it was no trouble at all. In fact, he's just glad he was able to be of use to someone. His simple, kind words seem to catch her completely off guard. She then offers to heal his wounds, revealing that she's a cleric with healing magic. The orb on her staff begins to glow as she prepares to cast the spell. She begins her chant, her voice filled with a strange, intense fervor. Hirotaka watches, a little confused by her over-the-top performance, but her concentration quickly turns to panicked strain. Her eyes begin to swirl as she struggles to get the words out. The spell backfires spectacularly, leaving her gritting her teeth in frustration. She can only offer a frantic apology as Hirotaka asks if she's all right. Looking down in shame, she admits that she was completely useless once again. Tears well in her eyes as she confesses that her anxiety always gets the better of her, making her healing magic fail. She stands defeated, convinced she's less valuable than a simple potion. And to her surprise, Hirotaka seems to agree with her. He clarifies his statement, asking if she's truly unable to use her magic. The girl explains that her anxiety and self-blame are what cause her to fail. It's all because she desperately wants to be useful and live up to expectations. But Hirotaka simply thanks her for her concern, saying her kindness is the best medicine he could ask for. He then asks her to try again, assuring her that it's okay even if she fails. The simple permission to fail leaves her completely speechless. He smiles, guessing that no one has ever shown her such kindness before. With a newfound determination, she grips her staff tightly. She closes her eyes and begins her chant once more, her voice steady. Hirotaka watches on as she calls upon a sacred power. She calls upon the power to heal his suffering, her voice filled with newfound resolve. A warm, gentle light envelops Hirotaka as she successfully casts her healing spell. He watches in amazement as the light mends his wounds completely. He's not just healed. His arm is sparkling clean, much to his own goofy delight. A single tear forms in her eye as she realizes she could do it all along. Overjoyed, Hirotaka offers her a high five to celebrate their success. She hesitates for a moment, completely flustered by the simple gesture, but she meets his hand with a smile, sharing in the triumphant moment. A wave of pure relief and happiness washes over her face, and Hirotaka can't help but smile, finding her genuine joy absolutely endearing. With the immediate danger past, Hirotaka realizes he doesn't even know her name. She introduces herself as Leisa, and he in turn tells her his name is Hirotaka. But Leisa's attention is quickly drawn to the strange weapon still in his hand. He cheerfully explains it's the demon sword Osoro, a piece of junk that's surprisingly powerful, leaving her utterly horrified. She asks in a panic if he's truly the wielder of the demon sword, a question that just confuses him. Because as she explains with dawning terror, that sword is the legendary mark of the Demon King himself. And far away, in a dark and ominous castle, a shadowy figure demands to know what was just said about the demon sword being lost. A subordinate laments that angering the lazy Demon King, Lord Tristan, is always a hassle. But the Demon King roars that the sword wasn't lost. It was stolen. The Demon King. Tristan seethes with rage, his subordinate cowering before him. He declares that the pride of a Demon King is to be stronger and freer than anyone else. His subordinate panics, thinking that any king who'd let his sword be stolen is a disgrace. Tristan's fury finally boils over into a silent, burning rage. He unleashes a wave of destructive energy, demanding they find the thief who took his blade. The blast sends his subordinate flying, who can only lament what a hassle this has become. As she soars through the air, she wonders just who could have stolen the demon sword Osoro. Landing with a look of pure malice, she vows to personally eliminate whoever is responsible. Back in the human world, Lise finally grasps the terrifying implications of what he's found. As they walk, Lise tries to process that Hirotaka found the sword purely by chance. She quickly dismisses her own panic, realizing he couldn't possibly be the real Demon King. But the title itself leaves Hirotaka completely bewildered. He recalls the reason he was summoned, to defeat the 7 Demon Kings who threaten this world. He turns to Lise, asking if the Demon King is really as evil as they say. She confirms without hesitation, explaining that he once destroyed an entire nation. Hirotaka stares at the blade, finally understanding that its immense power is the true mark of the Demon King. He can't help but think that getting kicked out of the hero party was actually a stroke of luck. But Lisa's voice pulls him from his thoughts. She asks him what he intends to do now that he possesses such a dangerous weapon. Lise can only picture the wielder of the demon sword as a monster, using its power to satisfy their own selfish desires. Hirotaka agrees, admitting that with this kind of power, he could probably do anything he wanted. And with that thought, he makes a decision. He smiles, declaring that he's going to take good care of this weapon. Lise can only stare back in utter disbelief, unable to comprehend his words. He explains that when he was all alone with no one to help him, this sword saved his life twice. To him, Osoro is more than a weapon. It's a partner, and he's going to treat it with care. His simple, earnest declaration seems to strike a chord with Lise. She realizes that this incredible person is completely changing her perception of the terrifying demon sword. And she begins to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she can change too. Lise offers her skills, explaining she has healing magic and other knowledge. With a burst of flustered courage, she asks if she can join him as a companion. She even declares that she'll do anything to be of use to him. But Hirotaka's immediate and firm rejection catches her completely off guard. She's left utterly confused, thinking that companions are supposed to help each other. He clarifies that he doesn't want her to be so dependent on him. He tries to explain that without any great skills, he'd just be a burden to her. But Lise gently takes his hand, insisting that's not true at all. She tells him that his garbage-picking skill finds value in things others have thrown away. And to her, that makes it a kind and truly wonderful power. Her kind words leave Hirotaka completely speechless. He grips her hand tightly, a silent acceptance of her offer. With a grateful smile, he thanks her, while a small, white creature rests peacefully before them. But their moment is interrupted by a new arrival with cat ears and sparkling eyes, who seems ecstatic that Hirotaka has no class. Before he can react, she grabs him and starts dragging him away with surprising strength. Lise can only call out his name as he's whisked away against his will. The strange girl pulls him along at an impossible speed, with Lise struggling to keep up. She finally stops, dropping him unceremoniously on the ground as she announces their arrival. She proudly welcomes them to her guild, the White Cat's Perch. The girl introduces herself as Rona, the guild master, while Lise tends to the dazed Hirotaka in the background. She shoves a registration form in his face, asking him to become an adventurer for her guild. Guilds are organizations where adventurers take on various quests for money. But both Hirotaka and Lise are completely baffled by the sudden proposition. They look around the guild hall, only to find it completely and utterly empty. It's so deserted that it's hard to imagine they get any requests at all. Hirotaka cautiously asks just how many members she actually has. An awkward silence hangs heavy in the air between them. Rona sweetens the deal, offering to rent him a room on the second floor if he joins. She cheerfully admits they have plenty of spare rooms, since there's nobody else here. She eagerly pushes him to accept, forcing Hirotaka to remind her of his actual name. After a moment of consideration, Hirotaka agrees to register. Rona explodes with joy, celebrating her first classless wanderer. Her sudden burst of energy leaves Hirotaka a little stunned. Lise can't help but ask if he's sure about joining such a rundown guild. But Hirotaka admits that having a clean, cared-for place to stay is a huge help. He figures that if Rona is trying this hard to recruit them, then this guild must be important to her. Rona seems to understand, adding that a place where you're valued is always a good thing. Her earnest words bring a gentle smile to Hirotaka's face. Overcome with gratitude, she thanks him profusely for joining. She then cheerfully threatens to plaster embarrassing drawings of him all over town if he ever dares to leave. With the paperwork complete, Rona presents them with their official guild cards. Hirotaka turns to Leisa, but she assures him that she's happy with any decision he makes. But hearing her name seems to spark a flicker of confusion in Rona. The guildmaster racks her brain, certain she's heard that name somewhere before. Meanwhile, Hirotaka examines his new adventurer ID card. A small smile spreads across his face as he takes in his new title. He realizes he's no longer alone now that he has Lise and Osoro by his side. But as Rona reviews Lise's registration, her eyes go wide with shock. A single name on the paper triggers a sudden, stunning realization. She shouts out Lise's full name, Montaigne, leaving the young cleric completely mortified. Rona points accusingly, revealing Lise is the daughter of this city's lord. Lise panics, trying to explain she's just a cleric on a training journey, as Rona gasps in realization. Understanding the situation, Rona agrees to keep Lise's identity a secret for now. But her mind is already racing, seeing this as a golden opportunity to gain favor and funding for her guild. She quickly changes the subject, asking the two of them what they'll name their new party. Hirotaka is caught off guard, having never considered needing a party name. Rona explains that adventurers usually pick names that reflect their goals or characteristics. Thinking it over, Hirotaka decides their guiding principle should be a relaxed, stress-free work-life balance. Lise watches on as her new companions seem to be having a lively debate about workers' rights. And with their philosophy decided, Hirotaka suggests a fitting name for their new group, the Gerakutars. Lise recalls his kindness, realizing that being told it was okay to fail gave her the courage to try. Rona offers a celebratory fist bump to seal the deal. But the name Gerakutars leaves Lise completely red-faced and flustered. She frantically tries to take back the suggestion, mortified by the name. But Hirotaka is absolutely thrilled with the idea. And so, he officially declares the formation of their new party, the Gerakutars. He gives a confident thumbs up, ready to show the world the soul of a junk collector. His unwavering optimism brings a warm smile to Lisa's face. Rona then gets serious, declaring that the entire fate of her guild now rests on his shoulders. He accepts the challenge, ready to work hard for their new life and home. Rona tumbles over in the background as Hirotaka declares their new life begins tomorrow. But as a new day dawns, he decides there's no time like the present to get to work. Back inside the guild hall, he tells his new companions there's one thing he needs to do first. He reaches out his hand, activating his unique skill, garbage picking. Rona watches with intrigue, admitting she's never heard of a power like his before. Lise explains that it's an incredible skill capable of finding rare and valuable items. Hirotaka hopes he'll get another lucky pull, just like the demon sword Osoro. The three of them watch with bated breath as the energy begins to coalesce. A bright flash of light signals the arrival of his new item. But his prize turns out to be nothing more than a pair of frilly underwear. Hirotaka can only stare, completely mortified by his latest pull. His new companions share in his shock, though Rona seems far more amused. He frantically tries to explain this wasn't what he wanted, but Lise seems to think it's an incredible find. But as the underwear falls, something else slips out from within it. A worn and tattered piece of paper flutters to the ground. Lise picks it up, curious as to what it could be. Hirotaka and Rona rush over to see what she's found. She declares that it looks just like a treasure map, much to their surprise. She explains that it seems to lead to the tomb of a famous magician in the nearby Ulika Valley. Holding it up for them to see, she points to the words clearly marking where the treasure lies. Hirotaka can only whisper the word, his mind reeling with the possibility of treasure. His imagination immediately conjures images of a chest overflowing with gold and jewels. Fired up, he declares that they have to go, seeing it as the ultimate otherworld adventure. But Rona quickly brings him back to reality, reminding him about his guild duties. Hirotaka counters, arguing that finding a famous treasure would be incredible publicity for their guild. Rona reluctantly agrees, but makes him promise to prioritize his life over any riches. Lise, however, voices her concern, knowing the tomb will be crawling with monsters. She points out a dark stain on the map, fearing it's a grim reminder of the previous owner's fate. But Hirotaka is confident, insisting that with Osoro's power and Lise's support, they'll be fine. With a determined grin, he declares that their course is set. They're going treasure hunting. With his new party assembled, Hirotaka points towards their first grand adventure. And so, he and Lise set off for the fabled tomb of Kayan. But the sheer scale of their destination leaves them both completely stunned. Before them stands a colossal gate, far grander than any tomb has a right to be. Lise notes it looks more like ancient ruins, which only fuels Hirotaka's excitement for the treasures within. Before they enter, she notices the new custom-made sheath for his demon sword. Hirotaka proudly explains he had the item shop owner craft it, believing Osoro deserves the best. He pats the hilt affectionately, happy that his partner is being treated with proper care. But their quiet moment is shattered by the appearance of a monstrous skeletal guardian. The creature draws its massive blade, ready to defend the tomb from any intruders. Both of them are sent into a blind panic by the sudden appearance of the undead guardian. Hirotaka tries to calm himself, but Leisa insists this is no time for composure. The skeletal monster looms over them, its empty eyes promising a swift end. But Hirotaka's fear is replaced by a steely resolve as he draws his blade. The creature lunges forward, its bony claws ready to tear them apart. But with a single swing of the demon sword, Hirotaka shatters the monster completely. Leisa can only watch as the pile of bones clatters to the ground, the threat neutralized in an instant. She praises his incredible power, and he responds with a confident peace sign. But his celebration is cut short as a dark energy begins to rise from the monster's remains. The strange aura coalesces into glowing text, revealing he's just acquired a new skill. He reads that Osoro has acquired a new skill, but is completely baffled by its name. Undead Attribute Grant. Leisa is just as confused, admitting she's never heard of a power that makes an opponent undead. Hirotaka wonders aloud why he would ever want to turn an enemy into an immortal monster. He shrugs it off, figuring it's probably a useless skill he'll never have to worry about. But Osoro suddenly begins to squirm in his hand, as if reacting to his dismissal. The blade extends once more, transforming into a massive, jagged greatsword. Both he and Leisa can only stare in awe at the weapon's intimidating new form. He struggles to swing the massive blade, marveling at how much his partner seems to be growing. With a determined look, he decides he'll have to start working out just to keep up with it. But a calm voice cuts in, telling him there's no need for that as a mysterious figure steps into view. The figure reveals herself to be a dark-haired elf with a menacing glare. Both Hirotaka and Leisa are immediately put on high alert by her sudden appearance. She raises her hand, declaring that they are about to be turned to ash. Leisa warns of a magical light as Hirotaka braces for another fight. The elf unleashes a strange power, proclaiming herself the Demon King of Sloth. But her dramatic entrance is ruined as she trips, landing her foot squarely on Hirotaka's head. Undeterred, she repeats her grand declaration with just as much fervor. The three of them stand in a bizarre, silent standoff. Hirotaka can only wonder if she's another monster, while Leisa seems more concerned that she's barefoot. But then the elf introduces herself as Rachel, an adventurer on a quest to defeat the Demon King. She points a finger at Hirotaka, asking if the weapon in his hand is the demon sword. She then leaps back, declaring that this must mean he is the Demon King himself. Hirotaka frantically pulls out his guild card, insisting he's just a brand new adventurer. But she completely ignores him, beginning a powerful chant as fire gathers in her hand. Leisa can only watch in absolute terror. She recognizes the complex incantation as a sign of an incredibly powerful magician. The elf glares, preparing to unleash her devastating attack upon them. Hirotaka is left completely dumbfounded by the sudden escalation. But just as she's about to finish her spell, she suddenly loses her balance. And with a pathetic thud, she collapses face first onto the stone floor. The self-proclaimed Demon King lies motionless on the cold stone floor. Hirotaka and Leisa can only stare as they realize she collapsed not from battle, but from sheer hunger. The sheer absurdity of the situation leaves them both completely speechless. After they share their food, the elf offers a weak apology for her aggressive introduction. She insists they should have just told her they weren't the enemy, while Hirotaka argues that he was trying to. As she eats, Rachel muses that while she didn't find the Demon King, finding his sword is still a major victory. Hirotaka recalls her name and her stated quest to defeat the Demon King. She explains with grim determination that the Demon King must be stopped before he brings untold suffering to the world. The weight of his new weapon's reputation hits Hirotaka all over again. But his concern is quickly overshadowed by the sheer amount of food their new acquaintance is devouring. Hirotaka holds up his empty bag in tears, lamenting that she ate all of his snacks. Leisa explains that a mage's mana is directly tied to their food intake, meaning Rachel's appetite is a sign of her immense power. While Leisa is in awe of the powerful magician, Hirotaka remains thoroughly unconvinced. Rachel smugly confirms her vast mana reserves, revealing she's a descendant of the legendary magician Kyan. The revelation that she's related to the tomb's owner leaves Leisa completely stunned. But a quick look at her family tree reveals she's not a direct descendant, but rather the apprentice of a disciple's apprentice. She then casually adds that she's also a former S-rank adventurer, much to Hirotaka's exasperation. He asks if she has any companions traveling with her on her quest. A shadow falls over Rachel's face as she looks down at her tattered clothes. She explains that her party disbanded, believing that a weak member only drags everyone else down. She declares that on this journey, she has no need for companions. Her words leave both Hirotaka and Lise completely taken aback. She then warns them to leave, explaining that a powerful monster lurks deep within these ruins. It's a story all too familiar to Hirotaka. Her equipment was stolen, leaving her with nothing but rags. He can't help but ask if that's the reason for her strange attire, much to Lisa's embarrassment. But his blunt question earns a fiery response as she shouts that she was humiliated. The very word sends Lise into a flustered panic, while Hirotaka remains thoroughly unimpressed. Rachel launches into a dramatic tale of how they stole her freedom and stripped her with undead hands. Hirotaka quickly cuts her off, yelling that her vivid story is not appropriate for Lisa's ears. But his outburst is completely misinterpreted, as she simply finds his stern expression rather cute. Rachel looks down at them, remarking that they must be skilled to have survived this far. But Hirotaka just smiles, telling her not to worry about them. He holds up his blade, declaring that Osuro is far more terrifying than any monster they'll face. Rachel ignores his bravado, asking what kind of power the demon sword actually possesses. She explains that there are 7 such swords in this world, each one holding immense power. Hirotaka admits he doesn't know the details, but it seems to absorb the abilities of the enemies he defeats. The elf realizes the terrifying implication. The more he fights, the stronger the sword becomes. A hand suddenly reaches out towards him, and he looks up to see Rachel standing over him with a new resolve. Her mind flashes back to a scene of utter devastation, a city laid to waste by the Demon King's power. The memory sends a wave of pure terror through her as she clutches her head. She remembers her identity as a genius magician, and that it was her duty to stand and fight. But because she failed to act, her comrades were lost. Now she's driven by a single purpose: to defeat the Demon King. She believes that if she fails this duty, her life has no meaning, and so she cannot let this opportunity pass her by. With a fierce glare, she declares that the demon sword must be destroyed. Her sudden intensity leaves Hirotaka completely stunned. She demands he hand over the weapon, warning him not to make this his final adventure. Hirotaka's eyes widen in pure shock at her sudden threat. His hand instinctively tightens around the hilt of his sword, as he flatly refuses to give up his trusted partner. But Rachel's gaze remains cold and unwavering. She begins a new chant, calling upon the great spirit of water. Hirotaka can only watch, completely baffled by her incantation. As water whips around her, he grabs Lise and screams for her to run. But the elf has no intention of letting them escape, vowing to destroy them. She gathers the water into a massive, swirling orb of destructive energy. With a final glare, she prepares to unleash her powerful water arrow attack. Hirotaka throws himself over Lise, shielding her as the spell crashes down. The sheer force of the impact sends them tumbling across the stone floor. He looks up in a daze, trying to process the sheer power of her attack. The entire entrance to the tomb has been blown away, leaving a gaping hole in the ruins. He asks Lise if she can still run, getting a shaky confirmation. With no other choice, the two of them flee deeper into the darkness of the tomb. Behind them, Rachel stands calmly amidst the steam and destruction. Her cold gaze follows them as they disappear into the ruins. After running for some time, they finally stop to catch their breath. Hirotaka decides they need to find a place to hide and regroup, using the time her attack bought them. But as they turn a corner, Hirotaka is stopped in his tracks by a bizarre sight. A massive, perfectly cooked piece of meat sits waiting in the middle of the ancient ruins. Despite the strangeness of it all, his stomach growls at the tempting sight. Lise immediately suspects it's a trap, and Hirotaka can't help but agree. He confidently declares that no one would be foolish enough to fall for something so obvious. But a familiar figure is already stuck to the giant meal, having taken a massive bite. It's Rachel, who somehow got ahead of them and fell for the trap instantly. But their reunion is cut short by a sudden crackle of energy. The elf's eyes widen in terror as she realizes her mistake. The giant piece of meat was indeed a trap, and it explodes with tremendous force. Hirotaka can only shout in disbelief at the sudden turn of events. When the smoke clears, the giant piece of meat is gone, leaving the three of them standing in the empty chamber. But Rachel, covered in soot, suddenly yells for them to get ready. With a serious glare, she declares a temporary truce. Her sudden change of heart leaves Hirotaka completely bewildered. She explains that the monster that humiliated her has finally appeared. A new wave of terror washes over Hirotaka's face. Before them stands a powerful undead creature, a skeletal mage known as a wight. Rachel explains that this is no ordinary monster, but a high-ranking necromancer. Leisa warns him to be careful, as a creature like this is sure to wield powerful magic. Rachel is furious, declaring the monster used a cheap imitation of her magic to trick her. She gathers her own power, demanding the creature return her stolen equipment. A massive explosion of magical energy erupts from her hands. Both Hirotaka and Leisa are stunned by the incredible display of power. Leisa figures an attack like that will surely finish the monster off. But a dark energy suddenly lashes out from the smoke. It engulfs Rachel, who lets out a pained scream. Hirotaka can only shout her name in alarm. When the dust settles, she's collapsed on the ground, defeated, and the white emerges from the smoke, completely unfazed by her attack. Hirotaka rushes to her side as Rachel admits the situation is grim. She realizes the monster's cloak nullified her magic, leaving her completely powerless. The white looms over the defeated elf, ready to finish her off. It grabs her head, unleashing a wave of dark, crackling energy. Leisa can only scream her name in absolute terror, but Hirotaka leaps in at the last second, blocking the attack with his bare hand. Rachel can only watch in stunned silence at his reckless heroism. The magic chars his arm to the bone, and he lets out a scream of pure agony. With the monster defeated, he apologizes for destroying her stolen equipment in the process. She can only ask why he would go so far to save her. She insists that retrieving her stolen equipment was her duty, and her fight alone. As a genius magician, she's always lived to fulfill her role, and he had no right to interfere. But Hirotaka cuts her off, telling her that her role has nothing to do with it. He smiles, reminding her that she called for a truce, which makes them companions for now. And as a companion, he says, it's only natural that he would help her, leaving Rachel completely speechless. But their moment is cut short by a strange sound from across the chamber. Rachel's eyes widen in disbelief at what she sees. Leisa points in horror, unable to comprehend the sight before them. The remains of the white begin to stir, its bisected body slowly knitting itself back together. Leisa explains that no healing magic should be powerful enough to mend such a fatal wound. The white stands fully restored, as Leisa realizes with horror that it is completely revived. Hirotaka can only complain that an immortal enemy is completely unfair. The word immortal echoes in his mind as he tries to grasp their situation. Leisa insists they have to run, seeing no path to victory against such a foe. But Hirotaka turns with a sudden burst of confidence, declaring that he can win this. He slams the demon sword into the ground, a new plan forming in his mind. He remembers the skill Osoro just acquired, the one he thought was useless. He realizes that if he can remove the monster's undead properties, he can finally defeat it for good. Rachel warns that it's reckless to face the white's magic head-on, even with the demon sword. But Hirotaka stands his ground, assuring his companions that everything will be all right. He tells them both to stay back, insisting it's too dangerous for them. Rachel can only watch, still processing his selfless actions. She asks why he would risk so much for someone he just met. But Leisa explains that Hirotaka is simply the kind of person who can't ignore someone in need. As he prepares, the demon sword begins to pulse with a strange, new energy. Leisa casts a defensive spell, and he thanks her for the support. With a protective aura glowing around him, Hirotaka charges headfirst towards the immortal monster. Rachel watches in disbelief, her quest to defeat the Demon King suddenly feeling very complicated. Her mind flashes back to her old party, remembering how they helped her grow as an adventurer. And because of them, she had begun to believe in the strength of companionship. But that belief was shattered when her party leader suddenly declared they were through. Her comrades called her a burden, saying they just wanted to make money easily. They told her it was the role of a genius to handle things on her own, and she was forced to accept that this was her path. If their roles were different, then they simply couldn't be together. Back in the present, the white lunges forward to attack Hirotaka, but he's stunned by a sudden movement from behind him. It's Rachel, stepping in front of him with a new resolve. He warns her that her magic is useless and she'll just run out of mana again, but she simply asks him what that has to do with anything. She reminds him of his own words, that they are companions now, and if that's true, then it's her turn to help him. She throws a small crystal to the ground. Unleashing a powerful earth spell, a massive wall of rock erupts from the floor, blocking the white's attack. Rachel pours all her remaining energy into the defensive barrier. The stone wall holds firm against the monster's assault. Leisa can only stare in awe at the sheer power of her magic. But then, she notices something crucial about the monster. As the white smashes through the wall, its magic-nullifying cloak is being torn to shreds. Leisa realizes with a gasp that Rachel's magic is now overpowering the monster's defenses. The elf stands her ground, a faint aura surrounding her exhausted form. She grits her teeth, admitting that her mana is almost completely gone. but the white is already upon her, its tattered cloak no longer offering protection. With her last bit of strength, she tells Hirotaka that the rest is up to him. He leaps into action, bringing the demon sword down with all his might. With a furious cry, he calls upon Osoro's power to remove its undead attribute. He lets out a final desperate roar as the blade slices cleanly through the monster's body. The creature's skull shatters, its immortal life finally coming to an end. The white's body crumbles, dissolving into a cloud of dark dust. And just like that, the immortal monster is gone, leaving only silence in its wake. Hirotaka and Lise can only stare, wondering if they've truly defeated it for good this time. A wave of pure relief washes over him as he celebrates their hard-won victory. He quickly turns to Lise, asking her to heal Rachel, who was injured in the fight. Lise casts her spell, and a gentle healing light envelops the exhausted elf. But Rachel's expression remains cold and unreadable. With the white defeated, she declares that before their truce ends, she has one question for him. She calls out his name, demanding that he answer her truthfully. She asks why, when she attacked him, he refused to let go of the demon's sword. Hirotaka smiles, holding the blade close as he explains that Osoro is his companion. His simple, earnest answer seems to finally break through her hardened exterior. She declares that for now, she will overlook the fact that he wields the demon sword. But her mercy comes with a very specific condition. She asks him to join her on her quest to defeat the Demon King. The sudden, shocking proposal leaves both Hirotaka and Lise completely speechless. He tries to stammer out a refusal, but she tells him she doesn't need an answer right away. She notes that he looks like someone who'd rather avoid such a troublesome task, and so she declares that she will simply wait until he changes his mind. She vows to wait for as long as it takes for him to accept her offer. Rachel asks with a hint of desperation if they can still be considered companions. Hirotaka immediately agrees with a wide smile, earning a quiet thank you from the elf. But she adds a smiling warning, vowing to destroy the sword herself if he ever uses it for evil. He just grins back, accepting her terms without hesitation. She then muses that he doesn't seem to have the laziness required to be the Demon King of Sloth. The title leaves Hirotaka completely baffled, insisting he's not nearly lazy enough for that. Rachel clarifies that Demon King of Sloth is just a name given to the current wielder. She explains that each Demon King is named for their defining characteristic, like greed or wrath. And with a teasing grin, she declares that Hirotaka fits the Sloth title perfectly, much to his dismay. Shaking it off, he holds up Osoro and declares that with their truce settled, it's time to get back to treasure hunting. He reminds her that's why they came, but Rachel seems confused by the mention of treasure. She explains that she's already explored these ruins and found nothing of the sort. He holds up the map, insisting it should lead them right to it. But Rachel immediately dismisses it as a fake, much to his shock. She recalls being scammed by a smooth-talking adventurer who sold her the very same map, which leads her to ask why Hirotaka is holding on to her property. The realization hits him. The fake map he found was the one she'd lost. And if the map was hers, then that means... He holds up the frilly underwear with a look of dawning horror. Rachel just looks on, completely oblivious to his sudden crisis. He quickly tries to dismiss the entire situation, his voice trailing off into nothing. Back at the guild, Rona is devastated to hear their treasure hunt was a complete bust. She wails about her grand promotional plans being ruined, while Hirotaka reminds her they barely survived. But Hirotaka just smiles, explaining that while the treasure was a bust, a new figure steps through the doorway, and he tells them he found something even more valuable. It's Rachel, now in a new outfit, declaring herself their newest companion. She seems quite pleased with her new attire, explaining that without any money for proper gear, this will have to do. She reflects on her own weakness, vowing to grow stronger on her own terms to fulfill her quest. Hirotaka formally introduces Rachel, whose former S-rank status leaves Rona completely stunned. Rona immediately grabs her hands, declaring the powerful elf is the savior her guild has been waiting for. Rachel offers a confident smile, saying she's happy to be a part of their team. The guildmaster is completely starstruck by the beautiful and powerful new recruit. Rona is already dreaming of the publicity a beautiful S-rank elf will bring, much to Hirotaka's annoyance. He then officially welcomes her to the party, but the name Gerakutars leaves Rachel a little confused. He insists it's a great name that shows their determination, while Lise can only cringe in embarrassment. Rachel, however, seems to accept the strange name without much argument. Lise, on the other hand, is still struggling to process the absurdity of it all. And with everything finally settled, a wave of exhaustion suddenly hits Hirotaka. Rona agrees they've all earned a rest after such a long day. But just as they're about to part ways, Hirotaka calls out to Lise, He holds out a simple pair of white gloves, offering them to her. She stares, realizing he'd gotten something for Osoro and Rachel, but nothing for her until now. He explains that he noticed she's always holding her staff and thought her hands might get sore. He worries it's a strange gift, telling her she doesn't have to take them if she doesn't want to. But she immediately shouts that she'll take them, admitting her hands get sweaty when she's nervous. With a gentle smile, Hirotaka wishes them good night and heads up to his room. Lise watches him go, his footsteps echoing in the quiet guild hall. She clutches the gloves to her chest, thinking about how much he's already given her. She thinks about how she still hasn't done anything to repay him. Her mind flashes back to the tomb, to all the times she was frozen in fear while he fought. She remembers him asking if she simply wanted to feel useful, but now she realizes that wasn't it at all. The truth is, she was just terrified of disappointing everyone around her. But then, he reached out a hand when no one else would. His simple acceptance was the one thing that truly saved her, because he was the first person to ever tell her it was okay to fail. And that kindness has ignited a new fire within her, a desire to truly be of use. With newfound purpose, she bursts in to find Rachel, determined to learn all she can about magic. But her training seems to be interrupted by a very casual Rachel in the bath. Hirotaka is startled by a strange request coming from the other room. He can only grumble that Rachel is already being a bad influence on Leisa. But as he lies in the quiet of his new room, a thought crosses his mind. He once believed he'd be all alone in this world, but now he has companions. Looking out at the night sky, he can't help but feel that his luck has truly turned around. And so, the newly formed Gerakutars begin their life as adventurers. They take on small quests, with wildly varying degrees of success. Their days are spent working, relaxing, and settling into their new home. A few days later, Hirotaka wakes up ready to greet his new family. But he's immediately taken aback by a strange sight. The guild hall is suddenly packed with people, all clamoring for attention. The floorboards groan under the weight of so many new arrivals. He rushes over to his companions, demanding to know what's going on. Rona is buried in paperwork, explaining that the administrative tasks are endless. But she declares that this is actually a massive success. She proudly holds up a flyer she made to promote their guild. Hirotaka realizes with dawning horror that she's been drawing rumors about them. Rachel explains that as adventurers become more famous, so does their guild. But the new recruits are already complaining that the handsome men from the flyer are nowhere to be found. Hirotaka can only shout that he's not the handsome hero they're looking for. But a scarred adventurer holds up the flyer, asking if it's true they defeated the monster in Kayan's tomb. Hirotaka can only offer a nervous confirmation. And in an instant, the entire crowd erupts with excitement and awe. He's immediately swamped with questions about the monster and how he managed to defeat it. One of the younger adventurers begs him to tell them the whole story. The sudden shift from scorn to admiration leaves Hirotaka completely stunned. He tries to back away from the enthusiastic crowd, completely overwhelmed. But Rachel steps in, explaining that adventurers are naturally drawn to those who are truly skilled. And for the first time, the guild hall is filled with the smiling faces of aspiring adventurers. Rachel points out that he's the one who got the crowd so worked up. In the background, Lise seems completely overwhelmed by all the sudden attention. She pulls her hood down, mortified that they've become the center of a rumor. One of the adventurers asks what his rank is, guessing he must be at least an A or S. But Hirotaka can only admit that he's a lowly E rank. The simple answer leaves the entire crowd completely stunned. Their admiration quickly turns to suspicion, wondering if they've been made fools of. But Rona leaps in to defend him, insisting there's a very good reason for his rank. Her sudden intervention only adds to the adventurer's confusion. She declares that Hirotaka intentionally keeps his rank low, driven by a noble desire to help others without seeking fame. She holds up a notice declaring that to meet everyone's expectations, Hirotaka will take the rank-up exam. The crowd roars with approval, convinced there's no challenge he can't overcome. And so, roped into Rona's scheme, Hirotaka finds himself preparing to jump straight to S rank. The day of the adventurer exam finally arrives. They make their way to the exam hall, a massive guild known as the One-Eyed Bear's Den. An examiner announces that those who passed the written portion should proceed to the reception desk. Other adventurers chat confidently, certain they've passed the first phase with ease. But Hirotaka and his companions look completely drained, the written test having taken its toll. Rachel quietly tells them to follow her as they try to slip away from the crowd. Hirotaka can barely get a word out, the pressure of the exam already weighing heavily on him. Against all odds, the three of them erupt in celebration, having passed the written portion of the exam. Hirotaka celebrates as if he's won a war, while Rachel dryly remarks on how easy it all was. But a flashback reveals the real reason for their struggle, a quiz show-style blame game over who was holding them back. He remembers the agony of trying to teach the so-called genius magician even the simplest concepts. Lise, however, insists that their study session was actually a lot of fun. Rachel just smiles, telling Hirotaka that he's the one who should be reflecting on his performance. Still, Hirotaka lets out a sigh of relief, just glad they managed to pass the first hurdle. He's determined not to disappoint everyone back at the guild who's counting on him. With the written test behind them, they decide to grab lunch before the practical exam begins in the afternoon. Meanwhile, back at the White Cat's perch, the new recruits gossip excitedly about their guild's rising stars. That afternoon, the practical exam begins at the edge of the dense Nomolus forest. An examiner explains that the test is a quest to transport cargo to a base deep within the woods. But to pass, they must also defeat 3 monsters and gather 2 types of herbs along the way. As Hirotaka and Lise look on, they realize this forest seems strangely familiar. Their minds flash back to the day they first met, when Hirotaka saved her from the monstrous bear. He can't help but smile, remarking that it feels nostalgic, even though it wasn't long ago. Rachel turns to Lise, confirming that this is the same forest where she was attacked. She adds that thanks to Hirotaka, a promising young magician was saved that day, much to Lise's flustered denial. Rachel notes that Lise has been studying magic relentlessly ever since that day. She pats the young cleric's head, saying that as a fellow magic user, she's proud of her dedication. Lise can only stammer out Rachel's name, completely flustered by the praise. But Hirotaka quickly shuts down her teasing, reminding her to stay focused on the exam. As the test begins, the other adventurers rush into the forest, eager to be the first to pass. But one of them stops, asking why Hirotaka's group isn't moving. He introduces himself as Edgar, revealing he's one of the new recruits from the White Cat's perch. Hirotaka is surprised to see so many of their new guildmates here for the exam. It seems monster activity has been on the rise lately, forcing the kingdom to recruit more adventurers. Rachel figures this recent surge is the reason Lise was attacked in this very forest. The weight of the situation settles on Hirotaka's shoulders. He knows that with more monsters, the danger for everyone has increased tenfold. He wonders why monsters seem to exist only to attack people. But he dismisses the thought, figuring that's just the nature of being a monster. Just then, the entire forest begins to shake violently. The sudden tremor catches everyone completely by surprise. The other adventurers scatter in a blind panic, fleeing from the unseen source. Chaos erupts as no one can figure out what's happening. Lise senses an immense wave of mana, stronger than anything she's ever felt. Hirotaka fears a powerful monster has appeared, confirming a dark rumor. But Rachel's eyes go wide with a dawning, terrifying realization. Seeing the danger, Hirotaka declares they have to help and rushes into the fray. But Rachel's voice cuts through the chaos, insisting this is all wrong. Because the source of this power isn't a monster, but something with a familiar horn and a small demonic tail. She repeats that this isn't what they think it is. A small demonic girl walks through the forest, leaving a trail of defeated adventurers in her wake. Hirotaka and Lise can only stare, shocked to see a child at the center of the chaos. But Rachel shouts that they're wrong to see her as just a child. Her eyes lock onto the girl, realizing she's finally found what she's been searching for, and a wave of pure terror washes over Hirotaka as he recognizes her too. Before them stands a figure of immense power, one of the 7 demon kings. The word hangs in the air, confirming their worst fears. A demon king. Her cold, reptilian eyes scan the forest floor, and she lets out a bored sigh, complaining that checking on everyone is such a hassle. But then, her gaze locks onto something, her expression shifting to pure focus. Rachel can only stare, her face a mask of dawning horror. The 3 of them are frozen in place, completely outmatched. And at Hirotaka's hip, the eye on the demon sword Asoro snaps wide open. In an instant, the Demon King launches herself through the air, straight for Hirotaka. He can only watch in absolute terror as she closes the distance. She reaches out a hand, her eyes burning with rage as she demands he give it back. But Rachel's magic intercepts her midair, creating a powerful shockwave. The Demon King stops, her expression shifting from rage to mild annoyance. She casually dismisses the attack, warning them not to get in her way. The force of the deflection sends her flying back, but she lands with ease. Rachel can only stare in disbelief, her mind struggling to process what just happened. Her powerful defensive magic was shattered with just a single finger. Lise watches as the remnants of the spell dissipate into nothing. She's frozen in terror, unable to even track the Demon King's movements. In an instant, the Demon King is upon Hirotaka, dismissing him as a worthless human. She grabs the hilt of the demon sword, demanding he return what he stole. Hirotaka refuses to let go, demanding to know what she's doing, but she scoffs, insisting he's the one who should be answering that question. She introduces herself as Jazella, the demon king of Sloth, and the true contractor of the demon sword Osoro. The revelation leaves Hirotaka completely stunned. He can only stammer out the words, trying to process what he's just heard. But even in his shock, his grip on the sword remains firm. With a single, effortless pull, she lifts him clean off the ground. His companions can only shout his name as he's dragged into the sky. He struggles against her, completely overwhelmed by the power contained in such a small frame. But her gaze softens slightly as she asks why he didn't just throw Osoro away. Her question leaves him completely bewildered. He realizes that Jazella was searching for Osoro, and he must have found it by mistake. The sword, he thinks, should be returned to where it truly belongs. Jazella reaches for the hilt, telling her weapon that it's time to go home. But as she tries to pull it from its sheath, the blade refuses to move. She lets out a cry of frustration, unable to free her own sword. Hirotaka can only watch in shock as the weapon defies its master. She pulls with all her might, but the sword remains firmly attached to Hirotaka. Defeated, she floats back as he calls out Osoro's name in confusion. The Demon King can only look down in silent frustration. Hirotaka can only look up, completely lost. Her frustration boils over into a furious tantrum. As she vows to destroy everyone in a fit of rage, she lunges forward, ready to unleash her power. But Hirotaka instinctively draws the blade to defend himself. And in his hand, the demon sword's eye snaps open. Pulsing with a sudden dark energy, the sudden surge of power stops Jazella in her tracks. The hilt of the sword begins to squirm and transform once again, sprouting two more grotesque eyes as it reveals a new, terrifying form. Jazella can only stare, her fury momentarily replaced by shock. Hirotaka is just as stunned, calling out his partner's name in disbelief. But the Demon King's shock quickly boils over into a furious scream. A monstrous aura erupts around her as she promises him a painful end. But Hirotaka looks to the sword, as if asking for its permission. And with a newfound resolve, he declares that he will never hand Osoro over. The two of them stand locked in a tense standoff, with Rachel watching from the sidelines. Jazella's eyes burn with hatred as she repeats her threat. But Hirotaka's determination doesn't waver for an instant. With a furious cry, the Demon King lunges forward to attack. He swings the blade with a desperate shout, meeting her attack head-on. But Jazella simply raises a hand, her eyes cold and calculating. She unleashes a volley of dark energy that tears through the forest. Hirotaka manages to block the projectiles with Osoro, but the sheer force of the impact leaves him stunned. The Demon King, however, seems completely unfazed by his defense. Their powers clash in a maelstrom of dark energy. Hirotaka grits his teeth, the feedback from the sword sending a jolt of pain through his body. Jazella just stares back with an expression of pure, utter boredom. She realizes her immense power is being completely negated on contact, and she demands to know what Hirotaka has done. He realizes it's a new skill called Mana Break, which destroys the mana of anything Osoro touches. He shouts that her attacks are useless now and tells her to just give up and go home. He suddenly remembers this is the skill Osoro acquired from the White, one he'd completely forgotten until now. He knows her mana isn't infinite, but her attacks are still too heavy for him to endure for long. The Demon King, however, seems completely unimpressed by his defiance. She's furious, wondering what this unknown skill is and how a mere thief could act so proud. She demands to know how he stole the sword from her castle, but he shouts back that he simply found it with his skill. The realization hits him. She didn't lose Osoro. She's the one who threw it away. The accusation sends Jazella into a panic, as she insists she would never throw her sword away. She sheepishly admits, however, that she might have just forgotten where she left it for a few decades. In fact, she only noticed it was missing when the other Demon King started making fun of her. Hirotaka explodes, shouting that forgetting something for that long is the same as throwing it away. Jazella just screams back at him, calling him an idiot for daring to lecture her. And so, the epic battle devolves into a childish shouting match in the middle of the forest. From the sidelines, Lise and Rachel can only watch the bizarre scene unfold. Rachel seems impressed that he can go toe-to-toe with a Demon King, while Lise just thinks they're having a silly argument. Jazella's anger fades as she recalls the days she and Osoro used to spend together. Her fond memories, however, mostly involve using the legendary weapon to open cup noodles and scratch her back. The childish argument ends, leaving an awkward silence hanging between them. Jazella finally snaps, declaring she's had enough of this nonsense. Hirotaka raises his sword, bracing for whatever comes next. But his attention is suddenly pulled away as he shouts, pointing into the distance. A squad of armed soldiers is charging through the forest, straight for them. Leisa and Rachel recognize them as the town's local guard force. The lead soldier shouts, refusing to believe a child could have defeated so many adventurers. He rallies his men, ordering them to attack the small girl. But a new voice screams for them to stop, warning them they are no match for a demon king. The soldiers freeze, the terrifying title echoing in their minds. But Jazella just bites her thumb, annoyed by the interruption. She calls upon the demons of temptation, summoning them with a dark chant. And from the shadows, a monstrous beast erupts into existence. Hirotaka can only stare in absolute horror at the new threat. A swarm of winged demons descends from the sky, surrounding the terrified soldiers. With a cruel smile, Jazella gives her new minions a simple, terrifying order. The demonic creatures lunge forward, ready to tear through the helpless guards. The soldiers can only scream, completely overwhelmed by the sudden assault. Hirotaka watches the chaos unfold, his mind racing, and with a desperate cry, he screams for her to stop. The demonic swarm descends, overwhelming the helpless soldiers in an instant. But Jazella's attention snaps back to Hirotaka, annoyed that he's looking away from her. He swings his blade, trying to remind her that he's the one she should be fighting. His eyes are filled with a desperate, protective fury. But she blocks his attack with ease, warning him he'll regret not handing over the sword. But then, her gaze shifts, her reptilian eye widening slightly. Her attention is suddenly drawn to a small, dark creature on the forest floor. The sight leaves the powerful demon king completely bewildered. Hirotaka is just as lost, wondering what could have possibly stopped her. And from the shadows, a new voice begins a dark and powerful incantation. It's Rachel, calling upon the dark art of necromancy. She declares that she won't let the demon king do as she pleases. But her undead minions only terrify the soldiers, who don't realize they're allies. Just then, Leisa steps forward, calling upon a sacred power to protect the innocent. She casts a powerful protection spell, shielding the soldiers from the demonic swarm. A look of pure determination crosses her face, her old fears now gone. Rachel watches on, realizing she's no longer the helpless magician she once was, and Leisa finds her own resolve, vowing to protect Hirotaka and everyone else. The two of them stand back to back, telling Hirotaka to leave this fight to them. He can only look back in surprise, calling out their names. Jazella is caught in the grasp of Rachel's undead minions, looking completely unimpressed. She smirks, noting that the elf is using necromancy, a power far beyond any normal magician. But Rachel stands firm, reminding the Demon King that she is a genius. Even so, she admits her power alone is still no match for a true Demon King. She turns to Hirotaka, realizing she can't win this fight by herself, but she believes that with him by her side, they might just have a chance. She calls on him to join her, declaring that now is the time to defeat the Demon King together. Hirotaka looks down, the weight of her words settling on his shoulders. He thinks about how he just wanted a quiet life, but somehow ended up in this mess. But he declares that he will never forgive anyone who dares to harm his companions. With a furious shout, he declares that he will defeat the Demon King of Sloth. The bold declaration seems to catch Jazella completely off guard, but her surprise quickly melts into a condescending laugh. A cruel smile spreads across her face, as she finds his sudden courage rather amusing. With a single burst of energy, she shatters the undead minions holding her. Rachel screams for her warriors not to let up their assault, ordering them to provide cover for Hirotaka. But Jazella just scoffs, dismissing the undead as a mere nuisance. And with a single devastating strike, she tears through Rachel's forces with ease. The undead army is torn apart in an instant. Jazella scoffs, finding the entire situation a complete hassle. But her gaze suddenly shifts, her eyes widening in surprise. As her undead assailants close in, she realizes something is wrong. She realizes with a jolt that her true target is no longer in front of her, because Hirotaka used the distraction to slip right into her blind spot. The Demon King can only stare, caught completely off guard. He'd used Rachel's undead army as the perfect decoy to get in close. With a confident grin, he declares that he's got her now, and he brings the demon sword Osoro down with all of his might. But his blade stops dead, caught in the Demon King's bare hand. The sheer shock of it registers on Hirotaka's face. Jazella just smirks, calling his attempt naive. With a single push, she sends him stumbling backward with ease. She looks down on him, completely unimpressed by his efforts. Hirotaka can only look up, the sweat beading on his brow. He grits his teeth, refusing to accept defeat. Planning his feet, he prepares to charge once more. He lunges forward, putting every ounce of his strength into the attack. But his relentless assault seems to catch the Demon King completely by surprise. With a desperate roar, he puts every last bit of his strength into a single final push. He drives the demon sword forward with everything he has, and the blade finally pierces the Demon King's chest. Her eyes widen in pure shock as cracks begin to form around the wound. But while she's stunned, Hirataka can only grit his teeth, pouring all his will into the strike. Jazella looks down at the blade, admitting she's impressed he managed to land a hit. But Hirataka's confidence shatters as he realizes his attack had no real effect. A slow, amused smile spreads across the Demon King's face. She finds his desperate struggle to be incredibly entertaining. With a final burst of power, she declares she will remember his name, Hirataka. The soldiers can only stare in disbelief as the Demon King and her minions vanish into thin air. A wave of cheers erupts from the guards, who believe they've just witnessed an impossible victory. But the battle has taken its toll on Hirataka, who clutches his side in exhaustion. His hand is covered in blood as Leisa calls out his name in a panic. He looks up in a daze, the strain of the fight clear on his face. His companions rush to his side, their expressions a mixture of shock and concern. But he just offers a weak smile, relieved that his friends are unharmed. He then looks down at his sword, glad that Osoro is all right as well. But the relief is short-lived as his body finally gives out, and he collapses to the ground, his companions shouting his name in terror. He lies unconscious, the battle having taken everything from him. But in the blink of an eye, rumors of the Demon King Jazella's appearance spread throughout the city. The townspeople react with a mixture of fear and disbelief. But the story that truly captures their attention is the one about the adventurer who defeated her. Back at the guild, Rona is absolutely losing her mind with excitement. She fawns over Hirataka's every move, much to his own annoyance. One of the younger adventurers is so overcome with emotion that she bursts into tears, leaving Hirataka at a loss. She explains that she was terrified by the sight of his injuries, fearing her magic wouldn't be enough. The thought that he might have died was just too much for her to bear. Her heartfelt tears leave our boy completely flustered, unsure of how to react. He can only stammer incoherently, asking if she could have said something a little more encouraging. Rachel just stares back, wondering if he's engaging in some kind of strange baby talk. The other adventurers explain that he's been unconscious for 3 days, and they were all worried sick. He apologizes to Rona, who quickly insists she was only concerned for the guild's reputation. Rachel then steps forward, saying she needs to properly thank him once again. She smiles, declaring that driving away a Demon King without a single casualty was nothing short of a miracle. One of the younger adventurers can only look on in awe, admitting he did something truly incredible. But Hirataka insists it was his fault for not returning Osoro, putting everyone in danger. Another adventurer takes the blame, saying he was the one who foolishly called the guards. But a senior guild member cuts them off, assuring them they all fought bravely against an unknown threat. But Leisa looks up at him, her expression filled with a quiet concern. Her hesitation, however, quickly gives way to a newfound resolve. She tells him that she's actually glad he didn't give up the demon sword. Her sudden declaration catches Hirataka completely off guard. Leisa explains that at first she was terrified of the blade and its connection to the Demon King. But now she understands that Osoro is more than just a weapon, it's his partner. And with a bright, relieved smile, she says she's just happy he didn't have to lose something so important. Rachel chimes in from the side, agreeing completely with the young cleric. She adds that if he were the type to abandon a companion, she never would have joined him in the first place. Their unwavering support leaves Hirataka completely speechless. He can only stare, completely at a loss for words. A quiet, heartfelt thank you is all he can manage to say. The other adventurers nod in understanding, their respect for him growing. One of them asks if the others know the truth about his demon sword. The revelation sends a shockwave of disbelief through the entire guild. The younger adventurers whisper in awe, vowing to keep their new hero's secret. But Rona cuts in, announcing she has news that might just overshadow his recent fame. She explains that in recognition of his achievements in the battle against the Demon King, she reveals a celebratory banner announcing the Gerakutars have been promoted straight to C rank. The unprecedented jump in rank leaves both Hirataka and the guildmaster completely stunned. Rona cheerfully declares that with all the new recruits, they'll have to hire more staff. The other adventurers are still buzzing about his victory, but Hirataka reminds them they never even finished their exam. The story of his battle has already become the stuff of legend around town. One adventurer claims the Demon King was completely helpless against Hirataka's might. But a familiar hooded figure whispers from behind him, adding to the exaggerated tale. The sudden voice sends a jolt of pure terror through Hirataka. It's Jazella, the Demon King herself, casually telling him to keep quiet. She warns that if she's bothered again, she might just destroy everyone in the guild. He can only stare in disbelief, wondering why she's here. When one of the adventurers asks what's wrong, Hirotaka can only stammer that it's nothing at all. Jazella casually tells Hirotaka to follow her, leaving him completely stunned. She explains that she just wants to have a little chat with him. And so, they find themselves walking through the streets of the city. Jazella, however, seems to be having the time of her life. She happily devours a local snack, while Hirotaka wonders why he's treating the Demon King to lunch. With her snack finished, she simply turns to walk away, looking for her next treat. Hirotaka calls out, asking how she's even alive after their battle. She scoffs at the question, insisting that a fight like that was nowhere near enough to defeat her, and that she wasn't even fighting seriously. The revelation that she was holding back leaves both Lise and Rachel completely speechless. But Hirotaka just grits his teeth, admitting he had a feeling that was the case all along. Jazella just smiles, a new idea clearly forming in her mind. Hirotaka grips his sword, asking if she's here to try and take Osoro back again. The two of them stand in a tense, silent standoff. But Jazella just scoffs, complaining that humans are always so quick to jump to conclusions. She explains that she's come up with a much better idea. With a strange, unsettling grin, she tells Hirotaka that he should just become the Demon King instead. The suggestion leaves our boy completely and utterly speechless. His companions are just as stunned by the sudden turn of events. Lise can't even begin to comprehend what the Demon King is suggesting. Jazella cheerfully explains that being a Demon King is a huge hassle, and she'd rather not deal with the responsibilities. Her gaze is intense, her offer seemingly serious. She insists that he's perfectly suited for the role of Demon King. The words trigger a memory, as Hirotaka recalls feeling strangely powerful during their fight. Jazella explains that Osoro was lending him its power, enhancing his body because it's taken a liking to him. She adds that if she'd been serious, no mere human could have stood against her. Hirotaka stands in silence, trying to process this revelation. He glances down at the demon sword at his hip, finally understanding the source of his newfound strength. Jazella leans in close, offering to make a contract and give him the throne, but he immediately refuses. And from the side, Lise shouts her own emphatic rejection of the idea. Lise explains she's heard that making a contract with a demon sword can corrupt a person's soul. She worries what might happen to Hirotaka, even if he has the best intentions. But Jazella just scoffs, telling them to be more honest with their own desires. She insists that becoming the Demon King will unlock Osoro's true power, granting him the freedom to live however he wants. The idea of a carefree life seems to give Hirotaka pause. The word freedom hangs in the air, a tempting offer, but he quickly snaps out of it, reminding her she just said being the Demon King was a hassle. He shouts that he'll adventure with Osoro, but he has no intention of becoming a king, he just wants a lazy life. Rachel tells him to stop being so stubborn, while Lise can only watch the bizarre argument unfold. The young cleric is left completely speechless by the turn of events, and so a new day dawns on the White Cat's perch. But Rona's morning is interrupted by a shocking sight. Jazella cheerfully introduces herself as the new Demon King in town, much to Hirotaka's dismay. He immediately throws her out of the guild hall, trying to play it off as nothing to the other adventurers. But the Demon King's presence quickly throws their peaceful life into chaos. Hirotaka can only look at Osoro, wondering how his life got so complicated. Jazella, however, seems to be winning over the guild master with ease. The constant disruptions leave Hirotaka completely at his wit's end, and as the chaotic days pass, Lise can only watch on with a quiet concern. A few days later, Hirotaka returns from his training, looking completely exhausted. Lise and Rachel are there to welcome him back to the guild. Rachel asks if he's gotten used to his swordsmanship training, and he admits he's managing. But his idea of training seems to involve coming up with over-the-top names for his special moves, much to Rachel's dismay. She reminds him that he's getting plenty of real combat experience from their guild quests. But Hirotaka reflects on how much he's relied on his friends, even when he thought he was holding his own. He realizes that Osoro has been supporting him this whole time, lending him strength without him even knowing. He admits to Lise that he's still just a weak human, but she quickly tries to deny it. He confesses that he was terrified during the fight, blaming himself for putting them all in danger, and that fear has ignited a new fire in him, a burning desire to become stronger. Lise looks up at him, her voice filled with a quiet concern. But Jazella's voice cuts in, reminding him there's a quick way to get the power he craves. He grits his teeth, telling the Demon King he's had enough of her suggestions. But the next day, Jazella appears in a strange new outfit, waving casually. The sight leaves Hirotaka and his companions completely stunned. He demands to know what she's wearing, but she just looks back with a smug grin. But from the doorway, a new voice calls out with a devious plan. Rona is ecstatic, seeing the Demon King as the perfect high-impact receptionist for their guild. Hirotaka confronts Jazella again, who seems to be enjoying all the attention she's getting. She leans in with a sly grin, explaining that everything she does is for the sake of a lazy future. She explains that she's brought him a very special request. With a flourish, she presents him with a joint subjugation quest. The very idea of a joint quest leaves Hirotaka completely baffled. Rona explains that such quests are issued when a monster appears that's too powerful for any single guild to handle. And this time, the monster they're facing is something truly special. It's a legendary creature, a massive dragon that has suddenly appeared. The news sends a shockwave of disbelief through Hirotaka and his companions. They can only stare, completely stunned by the revelation. Leisa and Rachel explain that dragons are creatures of myth, a threat far beyond any normal adventurer. But Jazella just smirks, declaring that a dragon will be the perfect training partner for him. Rona explains that with so many veteran adventurers joining, the rewards will be massive. Hirotaka considers the offer, admitting he's a little curious to see a real dragon. He asks if a joint quest of this scale means they'll be calling in the army for support. But Leisa looks up with concern, explaining that's probably not going to happen. She clarifies that the army belongs to the local lord, and deploying it could provoke other territories. They won't move unless there's a direct threat to the city, a fact that surprises Hirotaka. He remarks on how much she knows about the lord's affairs, sending her into a flustered panic. She frantically insists she just happened to overhear the information by chance. But Jazella's eyes narrow, repeating the flimsy excuse with suspicion. The Demon King states that of course Leisa would know, since it's her own family's business. But their conversation is cut short by the arrival of a mysterious, long-haired man. The entire party can only stare, wondering who this stranger could be. But Leisa's face drains of all color as she recognizes her former teacher. Her sudden outburst leaves Hirotaka completely confused. The man's gaze is fixed on Leisa, telling her he's finally found her. He stands before his former student, the air thick with unspoken tension. Leisa asks what he's doing here at her own family's home. He addresses her by her full name, Lise Montagne, and he reveals to the others that she is the daughter of this city's lord, destined to be the next court magician. The revelation sends Hirotaka reeling, finally understanding the truth of Lisa's identity. Hirotaka can only stammer, trying to process that Lise is a noble's daughter. He turns to her, asking why she never told him the truth. Her former teacher scoffs, questioning how someone so ignorant could be traveling with her. Rachel shouts from the side, asking if Hirotaka was really that clueless. Even Rona is hiding, terrified by the presence of this powerful newcomer. He's introduced as Ashen Glow, the legendary Sage of Ash and court magician. The tension is so thick that Rona fears her entire guild might be crushed under the pressure. Even Jazella seems surprised, realizing such a figure was so close by. Ashen Glow's patience wears thin as he declares it's time for them to leave. He orders Leisa to return with him to the Montagne household, much to her horror. The court magician reaches out a hand to take Leisa away, but Hirotaka intercepts him, grabbing his wrist with a firm grip. He steps between them, telling the powerful sage to wait. With a defiant glare, he declares he won't let him take Leisa by force. Ashen Glow looks down with a cold expression, asking just who Hirotaka thinks he is. He dismisses our boy as an outsider, insisting this is a family matter that doesn't concern him. But Hirotaka stands his ground, declaring that as her companion, he can't just stand by and watch. Rachel then chimes in, asking if the sage has been eating properly because he looks terribly pale. Her bizarre question seems to catch the powerful magician completely off guard. And to everyone's shock, a single tear forms in his eye as he begins to crumble. Hirotaka can only stare, completely baffled by the sage's sudden breakdown. But in an instant, glowing chains of magic erupt around him, binding him in place. He's caught completely off guard, unable to react. He realizes with dawning horror that his body is completely paralyzed. Rachel finds herself trapped as well, recognizing the powerful binding spell. Ashen Glow warns them not to struggle, lest they break their own bodies. Leisa can only watch in terror, calling out to her captured friends. The sage then grabs Leisa's arm, preparing to drag her away. He questions why someone of her noble status would ever be in a place like this, and Leisa is left completely frozen in fear, unable to resist. She begs her teacher to stop, her voice filled with panic. But he coldly states that she simply ran away, abandoning the role she was born to fulfill. Her mind flashes back to her childhood, born with a rare talent and destined to become the next court magician. From a young age, her life was a strict regimen of training and study, a path she believed was set in stone. But when she turned 10, the time came to demonstrate her magical prowess for the first time. The weight of everyone's expectations pressed down on her, their whispers of praise turning into a suffocating pressure. The sheer anxiety of the moment became too much for her to bear, and her magic erupted uncontrollably, destroying the entire hall in a single catastrophic failure. From that day forward, she was plagued by a crippling anxiety that caused her magic to fail whenever it mattered most. He asks if she ever considered her father's feelings when she ran away from home. He questions if she's satisfied now, or if she intends to cause even more grief. Lise can only offer a quiet, defeated apology to her former teacher. She then turns to Hirotaka, admitting she was just a useless person running away from her problems. With her head bowed, she apologizes for deceiving him all this time. But Hirotaka just lets out a long, weary sigh. He admits that this whole situation is becoming a real pain. He thinks about how he's always the last to know when his companions are suffering. He looks over at Lise, realizing that running away couldn't have been easy for her. And with a gentle smile, he tells her that she did a good job, leaving her completely stunned. His simple words of validation bring a tear to her eye, but Ashen Glow remains completely unmoved by their bond. He takes a single deliberate step forward, uttering the name of a powerful deportation spell. In an instant, a glowing magic circle erupts beneath their feet. Rachel immediately recognizes it as a teleportation spell, realizing he's about to take Lise away. She struggles against her magical restraints, but they refuse to break. She senses something strange about his magic, a feeling that's completely different from any spell she's seen. Hirotaka pours all of his strength into breaking free, but the sage simply tells him that his efforts are useless. Ashen Glow insists that a weak adventurer like him could never break free, but Hirotaka grits his teeth, refusing to give up. He lets out a roar, pouring every ounce of his will into the struggle. And against all odds, a crack appears in the magical chains. The powerful sage can only stare in utter disbelief. Hirotaka stands free, admitting he understands that Lise has a duty to her family. But he remembers that when he had nothing, she was the first person to ever ask to be his companion. His words leave Lise completely stunned, and with a final burst of power, the magical chains shatter completely. He declares that her role now is to be with them, her true companions. The powerful sage can only stare as his magical restraints are broken. Hirotaka pulls Lise behind him, shielding her from her former teacher. Ashen Glow can't believe his powerful binding spell was shattered so easily. Lise worries that breaking free must have taken a serious toll on his body, but Hirotaka just smiles, explaining that his body is a little special, and at his hip the demon sword of sorrow seems to pulse with a quiet power. He asks if she's all right, but she can only apologize for acting so selfishly. But he tells her he still hasn't heard what she truly wants to do. His simple question leaves her completely at a loss for words. But their conversation is cut short by a sudden movement from the side. Lise turns to face her former teacher, her expression filled with a quiet resolve. She thanks him for everything he's taught her over the years, her voice filled with respect. She admits that one day she will return home to fulfill her duty as a court magician. But she declares that day is not today, not yet. With a burst of courage, she shouts that she wants to stay with the Gerakutars, a place where she can fail and still keep trying. Her heartfelt declaration leaves the powerful sage completely stunned. He asks her when, other than this very moment, she has ever truly spoken her own mind. Lise turns back to Hirotaka, wondering if she has the right to ask for this after deceiving them. But Rachel cuts in, telling her to stop being so meek and to stand tall with her new companions. And Hirotaka shouts his agreement, telling her that of course it's okay. Her place is with them now. His unwavering support brings a bright, genuine smile to Hirotaka's face. Ashen Glow seems to relent, a faint, understanding smile on his face. Lise is completely overcome with emotion, tears of relief streaming down her face. Rachel chimes in, insisting Lise's magic training is going well and she has no reason to hold back. Hirotaka agrees, joking that her healing magic is so good it even improves his skin. With a dramatic pose, Rachel declares that Lise is a true magical genius, and she's never wrong. Ashen Glow turns away, his expression unreadable. He quietly admits that he knows her potential better than anyone. He reveals that Lise possesses the divine protection of Shakura, a power that requires immense talent. The revelation of this divine blessing leaves Rachel completely stunned. Hirotaka can only listen, realizing this explains the incredible quality of her holy magic. Ashen Glow explains that it was his duty to nurture that talent and raise her to be a proper court magician. He declares with a heavy heart that this was his sole mission, but Hirotaka looks ready to argue the point. The sage, however, offers them a challenge. To prove that this guild is truly where she needs to be, the sudden proposition leaves both Hirotaka and Lise completely stunned. He brings up the dragon subjugation quest they were just discussing, and with a cold glare, he demands they bring him the head of the beast. He adds that if they fail, Lise will return home with him as originally planned, because he cannot entrust her to a party that can't even handle a trial of this magnitude. Lise shouts her acceptance, declaring that even if it's impossible, they will do it. The three of them stand united, ready to face the impossible challenge. Ashenglow looks back, his expression softening ever so slightly. He quietly accepts their resolve, seeing her newfound determination. With his decision made, he turns and begins to teleport away. He promises to return once the quest is over and will handle her family in the meantime. Lise calls out to her teacher one last time. She apologizes for being such a selfish and difficult student, but with tears in her eyes, she thanks him for giving her this chance. And with a final shimmer of light, the powerful sage vanishes from the guild hall. With the powerful sage gone, the three of them are left to face their impossible task. But Hirotaka just grins, declaring that they have no choice but to see this through. Rachel smirks, adding that her arms are tingling with excitement. Or maybe that's just her stomach. Lise clutches the gloves he gave her, vowing to master her divine power. She knows that with them, she can finally become so much stronger. And with their goal set, the entire guild erupts with a cheer of support. The whole place buzzes with energy, ready for the legendary hunt. But upstairs, Jazella muses that what started as a boring story is quickly turning into something far more entertaining. She watches from the window, a sly grin on her face as she observes their every move. Far from the city, in the quiet countryside, a shadow falls over the distant mountains. A great eye opens, waking from a long slumber. And a legendary beast takes to the skies, soaring with impossible speed. The dragon has returned, a creature of myth and power. Its shadow alone is enough to strike fear into the hearts of men, and news of its arrival spreads to every corner of the kingdom. Inside a different guild, a confident adventurer declares that they will join the dragon hunt. But his bold proclamation is met with nothing but shock from his comrades. One of his companions dismisses the dragon as a big lizard, while the other complains about the hassle, but their leader silences them with a cold glare, asking if they have any complaints. The grumbler insists their leader is being too arrogant, while the woman says he was just playing with them. The leader declares he will not live his life as a worthless nobody, vowing to prove he is the most superior human in this world. His eyes narrow as he wonders who dared to steal the glory of defeating a demon king, and with a cold fury he declares that he will never forgive them. Back with Hirotaka, however, he's just excited for the adventure to begin. The day of the dragon subjugation finally arrives, and the adventurers gather at the designated meeting point. He looks around at the massive crowd of powerful adventurers, a little overwhelmed by the sight. But he's immediately annoyed to find Jazella floating beside him, demanding to know why she followed them. She explains that dragons are a rare sight, and she simply had to come see one for herself. Hirotaka just stares back, completely unimpressed by her flimsy excuse. But his attention is drawn to a group of rough-looking adventurers nearby. They're mocking the arrival of the so-called hero, wondering what they're even doing here. Rachel notes that it's best to avoid such unpleasant types, but Hirotaka is just confused by the mention of a hero. One of the adventurers then turns, telling someone else that they're in the way. Hirotaka's eyes widen in shock as he recognizes who they're talking to. The spiky-haired adventurer gets in the newcomer's face, but the man calmly identifies him as Kenichi. And it's none other than Hirotaka's former party leader, who looks down on the adventurer with utter disdain. The condescending remark sends the spiky-haired man into a silent, burning rage. The adventurer lunges forward in a blind rage, his comrades barely able to hold him back. But Kenichi intercepts the blow with ease, his expression one of utter boredom. The spiky-haired man is stunned by the sheer difference in their strength. Kenichi's blade trembles as he states he has no time to waste on the weak. His eyes narrow with a chilling threat, telling the man to get out of his way. The other adventurers grumble that the so-called hero did nothing when the Demon King appeared. Kenichi just scoffs, telling them to go home if they're only looking for easy work. He turns his back on them, dismissing the entire confrontation as a waste of his time. Hirotaka watches him go, realizing his former leader hasn't changed one bit. One of Kenichi's party members just sighs, complaining that this is all becoming a huge pain. His party members agree, telling the other adventurers they should just go home. But the spiky-haired man fires back, blaming them for making him look like a fool. He grabs the blonde man by the collar, shouting that he doesn't care about their excuses. He insists they were dragged here and used, but the hero's companion remains completely unfazed. A cold look crosses the blonde man's face as he prepares to act. Kenichi turns away, declaring this quest offers the greatest reward they've ever seen. Hirotaka can only watch as his former comrades head towards the mountain. Rachel asks if he knows them, sensing the dangerous air around the hero's party. He admits they're the ones who kicked him out, explaining how weak he was before he found Osoro. Leisa recalls Kenichi's unique skill, attack nullification, realizing just how powerful he truly is. Hirotaka rallies his companions, declaring they'll have to work hard with such strong rivals around. But the other adventurers whisper that they'd rather trust Hirotaka, the one who was kicked out. The rumor finally reaches Kenichi that Hirotaka was the one who defeated the Demon King. The news hits him with the force of a physical blow, his mind refusing to accept it. He remembers Hirotaka as nothing more than a useless burden with a worthless skill. His shock turns to rage as he screams for the dragon to appear, vowing to defeat it himself. He's determined to reclaim the glory he believes is rightfully his. But just then a shadow falls over the entire mountain range. The adventurers look up in confusion, a sense of dread washing over them, and a single word of terror escapes their lips as the legendary beast arrives. The word hangs in the air, confirming the arrival of the legendary beast. It's a creature of immense power, its scales shimmering in the sunlight as it lands. But before anyone can react, Hirotaka shouts out Rachel's name in alarm. The elf has already launched herself into the air, unleashing a powerful wind spell. The vortex of wind seems to throw the massive beast off balance for just a moment. Hirotaka can only watch from the ground, stunned by her reckless move, but his attention is suddenly drawn to another figure leaping into the fray. It's Kenichi, who seems just as surprised to see Hirotaka on the battlefield. But his shock is quickly replaced by a furious determination to claim the dragon's head for himself. He flies straight towards the monster's open maw, ready to land the first and final blow. But Hirotaka realizes with a jolt that Osoro's mana break should have worked. The dragon, however, unleashes a torrent of pure, unblockable flame. The blast sends Kenichi tumbling through the air as Lise and Rachel cry out Hirotaka's name in fear. Our boy is left reeling from the aftershock, wondering if he's even okay. He looks at his sword, confused as to why its mana-destroying power had no effect. But Jazella casually explains that the dragon's breath isn't magic at all. The revelation leaves Hirotaka completely stunned, and the beast unleashes another devastating attack, a swirling vortex of pure power. The sheer force of the blow sends them all stumbling back as Hirotaka warns them to brace for the next one. He grits his teeth, his expression hardening with a new resolve. But just as the chaos unfolds, a new voice roars across the battlefield. A massive, horned figure appears, declaring he's finally found his target. His eyes lock onto the Demon King as he utters Jazella's name. Hirotaka can only look on, completely exasperated by this new arrival. But the newcomer's fury is directed at Jazella, complaining that she's far too small. He throws a tantrum, shouting about how much trouble he went through to find her. Their epic confrontation devolves into a bizarre argument about size, with Jazella complaining he's too loud. The sheer absurdity of the situation leaves Hirotaka completely speechless. He turns to Jazella, asking if she knows this strange, powerful man. She just offers a sly grin, telling him he should already know the answer. He introduces himself as Tristan, the Demon King of Wrath. Hirotaka and the other adventurers can only stare, completely overwhelmed. Our boy grits his teeth, realizing this is no time for jokes. Jazella floats away as Kenichi watches the new arrival from below. He realizes with a manic grin that the dragon was actually a demon king all along. Tristan turns away, declaring that if he can defeat her, then he will be. His eyes burning with a furious, all-consuming ambition. The sheer pressure of his presence leaves even Kenichi sweating. Tristan then turns to Jazella, asking if she's found the demon sword. She casually points to Hirotaka, telling him to just take it back from the kid himself. Jazella cheerfully declares she's giving up her title and the sword to Hirotaka, who frantically denies it. The Demon King of Wrath can only stare back in utter disbelief. His confusion quickly boils over into a silent, burning rage. He admits he respected her laziness, seeing it as the ultimate expression of a demon king's freedom, but he declares that she is no longer fit for the title. Hirotaka screams for everyone to get down, sensing the immense danger. Tristan raises a hand, gathering a terrifying amount of destructive energy. With a single word of malice, he prepares to unleash his power. A blinding flash of light engulfs the entire battlefield in an instant. When the light fades, Hirotaka struggles to understand what just happened, his body racked with pain. He tries to calm himself, forcing his mind to assess the situation. His eyes are wide with shock, his body trembling from the blast. He looks out over a barren wasteland, the entire mountain flattened by the attack. But a faint groan catches his attention, and he realizes Kenichi is still alive. A faint protective light seems to be emanating from the fallen hero's body. He recognizes the glow as Leisa's protection spell, the one she cast on the soldiers. A wave of relief washes over another adventurer as he realizes Leisa saved them all. But Hirotaka's relief is cut short by a sudden, dawning horror. He sees Leisa holding an unconscious Rachel in her arms. The young cleric explains that Rachel used her own body to shield her from the blast. A flashback reveals the moment of the blast, with Tristan looming over them all. Rachel grits her teeth, pushing through the immense pain. She had thrown up a last-ditch barrier to shield Leisa from the attack. She explains she used every last bit of her mana to protect the young cleric. She tells Leisa that with her divine power, she's the one who can protect everyone. The elf offers a final, confident smile, believing in her friend's potential. Back in the present, Leisa begs Hirotaka to save himself and the others. She laments that even with her power, she still couldn't protect them all. But Hirotaka shouts back that it's okay, insisting they're all still alive because of her. He tells her to keep healing everyone while he takes care of the Demon King himself. Wiping away a tear, Leisa agrees with a newfound determination. But Jazella explains that once Tristan's rage is unleashed, he won't stop until everything is ash. She adds with a cruel smile that it's impossible for him to win unless he becomes a Demon King. Hirotaka can only shout her name, furious at her casual cruelty, but his anger is overshadowed by the sheer terror of Tristan looming over him. A cold sweat drips down his face as the reality of their situation sinks in. The Demon King of Wrath looks down on him with a single, dismissive word. He smashes his fist into the ground, unleashing a wave of pure, destructive force. His furious roars echo across the wasteland, calling them all weak. And Hirotaka can only scream back in a mixture of defiance and utter desperation. Tristan stands over the fallen Hirotaka, completely unimpressed by his defiance. He roars in frustration, furious that such a weakling is even trying to fight him. Jazella, meanwhile, just floats nearby, looking completely bored by the whole affair. Hirotaka can only cough, the force of the last blow having completely winded him. He realizes with dawning horror that this is the true, overwhelming power of a Demon King. And a wave of despair washes over him. There's simply no way he can win this fight. Tristan scoffs, mocking the pathetic humans for ever thinking they stood a chance. He bares his teeth, ready to end this pointless struggle once and for all. But Leisa stands her ground, her staff glowing as she prepares to defend them. Her resolve, however, is shattered by a sudden shocking sight, because Hirotaka can only scream her name in a desperate panic. He looks down at his sword, realizing there's only one path left for him in Osoro. Jazella's cruel smile returns as she offers him the contract once more. But Leisa's voice cuts through the chaos, forbidding him from taking that path. Her sudden intervention leaves Hirotaka completely stunned. She stands before the Demon King, her back to her friends. A quiet, unwavering determination fills her eyes. But Tristan just roars, telling the weak to die where they stand. And he unleashes another devastating wave of destructive energy. Hirotaka can only watch in absolute horror, powerless to stop the attack. She remembers the day they first met, and the words he spoke to her, how he told her that her kindness was the best medicine he could ask for. With tears in her eyes, she declares that it's that kindness she truly loves. And she knows that if he becomes a Demon King, that kind person might be lost forever. Jazella just scoffs, dismissing her heartfelt plea as a pointless imitation. But Leisa stands firm, vowing to resent him if he ever takes that path. Her sudden, fierce declaration leaves Hirotaka completely stunned. But Tristan just scoffs, telling her to die, lamenting her own powerlessness. He raises a single dismissive finger, and with a simple flick, unleashes his devastating power. But in that instant, a wave of holy light shields everyone on the battlefield. With a desperate cry, Leisa unleashes every ounce of her divine power. She calls upon her magic, weaving a desperate chant of protection and healing. Her voice echoes across the wasteland, a final defiant stand against the Demon King. Her mind flashes back to her teacher's words, telling her she could do it. He always knew there was no way she could be without talent. And in this moment, she finally understands what he meant. She remembers the absolute, terrifying power she's always held within her. A power she's known about her entire life but was too afraid to use. A power that once brought nothing but destruction and shame. She apologizes for being so scared that she always looked away. But now, she embraces her younger self, asking for the strength to move forward. And in a blinding flash, a wave of pure, holy light erupts from her body. The Demon King of Wrath can only stare, completely stunned by this sudden surge of power. Even Jazella is taken aback by the sheer scale of Leisa's magic. The orb on her staff glows with an impossible intensity. Hirotaka looks on in absolute awe, his mind reeling. Even Kenichi can only whisper in disbelief, wondering if he's witnessing a true goddess. and from the light, a massive divine figure emerges, holding Leisa in its hands. It's the compassionate Holy Mother, Shakura, the source of Leisa's divine protection. Her eyes glow with divine light as she asks for the power to protect them all, and the Holy Mother Shakura reaches out a benevolent hand. A wave of gentle energy lifts Hirotaka and the other adventurers from the ground, enveloping them in a warm, protective light. The divine being gathers every last survivor into a massive sphere of holy magic. Tristan can only stare, recognizing the manifestation of a true god. He can't believe that a mere human could wield such incredible power. Even Kenichi is left completely speechless, whispering in absolute awe. But Leisa isn't finished, praying for just a little more of that divine strength. She needs the power to finally stop the Demon King's rampage for good. Tristan can only stare in disbelief at the divine power before him. Hirotaka is just as stunned, his mind unable to process what's happening. But Jazella seems to be enjoying the show, a gleeful smile on her face. Leisa's eyes burn with a holy light, her power now fully unleashed. And with a single, devastating blow, the Holy Mother slams Tristan into the ground. The Demon King of Wrath can only grit his teeth, stunned by her overwhelming strength. Leisa declares that for the first time she is truly angry. She closes her eyes, focusing all of her will into the divine being. And the Holy Mother Shakura prepares to deliver a final divine judgment. But Tristan lets out a furious roar, refusing to be defeated by a mere human. The divine being closes its hands, crushing the Demon King with overwhelming force. Tristan can only struggle as the immense pressure bears down on him. Hirotaka can barely stammer Leisa's name, completely stunned by her terrifying power. The Holy Mother's grip tightens, a silent final judgment. She looks down on the Demon King, calmly asking if he's angry. But Tristan explodes with rage, furious that she would dare to mock him. He roars that she has no idea who she's dealing with. With a burst of power, he breaks free from her divine grasp. He lands with a defiant glare, warning her not to get carried away. And he unleashes a final desperate wave of destructive energy, vowing he will not be defeated. The Holy Mother Shakura stands firm, her divine power nullifying his attack. Leisa grits her teeth, pouring every last ounce of her will into the spell. But Tristan just scoffs, finding the entire situation irritating. Leisa declares that with her guardian god, his attacks are completely useless. But the Demon King just asks what she thinks she's accomplished. He clarifies that he's not angry because she blocked his attack, but because of her own foolishness. He calls the manifestation of a god a cheap trick with an immeasurable cost. He then asks if she's truly prepared to die for this. The question sends a jolt of pure shock through Hirotaka, but Leisa's expression hardens, her resolve unwavering even in the face of death. Tristan explains that her power is just a stalling tactic, buying time for Hirotaka to find an opening. But Leisa grits her teeth, declaring that she will endure it for as long as it takes. The Demon King just smirks, asking if she truly believes his flames are just simple magic. He explains that his power is born from both his mana and his life force, a flame that will burn for all eternity. He calls upon a great fire god, offering his own life as fuel to burn away all sin. A massive, swirling orb of dark fire gathers, an attack he calls Cosmic Meteor. He grins maniacally, daring her guardian god to withstand a power that can erase a mountain. The devastating attack descends, threatening to incinerate everything in its path. Leisa can only call out Shakura's name, her body trembling under the immense pressure. Hirotaka looks back at her, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. But as the attack descends, Hirotaka leaps into action, apologizing to the divine being for what he's about to do. He declares that this is a power that even a god can't stop. And with a furious cry, he unleashes Asoro's mana break skill. He shatters the divine barrier with a single desperate swing. His eyes are filled with a desperate, unwavering resolve. The sudden move catches even the Demon King of Wrath completely off guard. Tristan can only stare, wondering what kind of human would dare to wield the demon sword in such a way. Leisa calls out to him, begging him not to be so reckless. The name seems to catch Tristan's attention, repeating it with a hint of curiosity. He then remarks that it sounds like a Japanese name, a comment that leaves Hirotaka completely stunned. Hirotaka demands to know how a demon king could possibly know about Japan. Tristan looks up from the ground, a strange realization dawning on his face. He proudly declares that he too was once a human from Japan, summoned to this world over a century ago. The revelation leaves Hirotaka completely speechless, his mind reeling. Tristan smirks, figuring that as a fellow countryman, Hirotaka must understand his desire for power. But his calm demeanor shatters in an instant as he lets out a furious roar. The sudden shift in his mood catches Hirotaka completely off guard. He can only watch in stunned silence, a bead of sweat rolling down his face, and to his horror, the Demon King bites down on his own massive blade. He then asks with a manic grin if Hirotaka is impressed by the display. He proudly declares the name of his own weapon, the Demon Sword Legion. Hirotaka can only stare in shock, recognizing the blade as a Japanese sword. Tristan explains he's from a much older era of Japan, a time before katanas even existed. But he dismisses the details as unimportant, his focus returning to the present. He walks forward, admitting he's been curious for a while about which demon sword is truly the strongest. With a manic grin, he proposes a duel between fellow Japanese men, pitting his Demon Sword Legion against Hirotaka's Demon Sword of Sorrow. The two of them stand facing each other across the barren wasteland, ready for a final showdown. From a distance, Leisa and the other survivors can only watch as the two prepare to clash. Even Kenichi is stunned, just grateful that he somehow managed to survive the blast. Kenichi can only stare in disbelief, his mind struggling to process what he's seeing. One of his companions shouts that they have to run, that there's nothing they can do here. But the hero can only look back, the very idea of fleeing completely foreign to him. He questions why, after everything, he still hasn't proven his own worth. His companion can only look back with a grim understanding. He finally turns away, telling Kenichi to do whatever he wants before leaving him behind. Kenichi remembers the day he was chosen, his heart trembling with purpose. He believed that being chosen was proof of his value, but now he's not so sure, because in this moment, he realizes that no one is even looking at him. As the two demon sword wielders clash, their powers shaking the very earth beneath them, Hirotaka digs his heels in, struggling to hold his ground against the onslaught. But Tristan just laughs, telling him there's no time to rest. He presses his attack, easily overpowering our boy's defenses. The Demon King's eyes burn with a cold, unrelenting fury, and Hirotaka can only stare back, stunned by the sheer difference in their power. But from the side, Kenichi screams for Hirotaka to look at him. Hirotaka turns, relieved to see his former leader is still alive. He even suggests they fight together, praising Kenichi's powerful skill. But his offer of a truce is met with a sudden, vicious attack. Hirotaka can only shout in disbelief as his former comrade turns on him. But Hirotaka realizes with a jolt that those are his own words. Kenichi scoffs, asking why a useless weakling like him is even fighting a demon king. And then, a twisted realization seems to dawn on his face. With a manic grin, he demands that Hirotaka hand over the demon sword. Hirotaka can only stare in confusion, as Kenichi admits he always found his sudden strength suspicious. He sneers that it's all thanks to the sword, a weapon he could put to much better use. He declares that he was the one who was chosen, not some piece of trash. A flashback reveals his obsession with his own power, and his utter disdain for Hirotaka's seemingly worthless skill. To him, only things with tangible value are worth having. He sneers that the power isn't even Hirotaka's to begin with. With a furious scream, he tells him not to get so carried away. Hirotaka shouts back that this is no time for fighting, pleading for them to work together. But Kenichi is completely lost to his rage, sick of Hirotaka's newfound confidence. But a new voice cuts in, as Tristan demands to know who dares interrupt their duel. The Demon King of Wrath stands between them, his presence silencing their petty squabble. Hirotaka's face drains of all color as he realizes the danger he's in. Even Kenichi can only grit his teeth in frustration. From the sidelines, Leisa looks up at her divine guardian, praying for everyone's safety. The Holy Mother Shakura stands watch, a silent protector over the battlefield. Leisa can only watch in absolute horror, because Tristan unleashes a wave of pure destructive energy. His blade carves through the very ground beneath them, sending the so-called hero flying with a single effortless swing. Leisa can only whisper in disbelief at the impossible sight. The strain of maintaining her divine power finally takes its toll. She collapses to the ground as Hirotaka shouts her name in a panic. He rushes to her side, fearing the absolute worst. But he lets out a shaky breath, realizing she's only unconscious. Tristan looms over him, declaring his demon sword can cut through anything. He realizes that not even Leisa's divine magic could stand up to that attack. And Tristan notes that even Kenichi's famed attack nullification skill was useless. The so-called hero lies defeated, his body torn apart by the Demon King's power. But against all odds, Kenichi's eyes flutter open, still clinging to life. Hirotaka calls out to him, urging him to get back on his feet and keep fighting. But Tristan's patience has worn thin, eager to continue his duel with Hirotaka. Our boy can only stare at his fallen rival, the battlefield silent for a moment. Kenichi struggles to push himself up, his body racked with pain. He wonders if this is it, if the Demon King is about to land the final blow. But Tristan just scoffs, declaring that the hero's true pathetic nature has finally been revealed. His mind flashes back to his own cruel philosophy, a world where the useless are simply cast aside. He's always hated weakness, believing it's a flaw that deserves to be purged. But now, he's the one lying broken on the ground, a single tear of defeat in his eye. He looks up, his mind struggling to comprehend what's happening, and his eyes snap wide with a dawning, impossible realization. He sits up in a daze, realizing his fatal wounds are somehow healing. Looking up at Hirotaka, he explains that he just used a skill for the first time and it seems to have worked. But Hirotaka reveals he used Asoro's Undead attribute grant, seeing it as the only way to save him. Kenichi can only stammer the word undead, asking why Hirotaka would go so far to help him. Hirotaka just looks down, explaining that he simply couldn't let him die. Kenichi can only stare, completely unable to process this act of kindness. But his shock is cut short by a sudden, terrifying movement. Because Tristan lunges forward without a moment's hesitation, striking Kenichi down with another devastating blow. The Demon King complains about how annoying these interruptions have become. He looks down on the fallen adventurers with utter contempt, declaring that all this useless garbage was a mistake from birth. But his cruel words finally push Hirotaka too far. He roars back that no one has the right to call them garbage just for trying to live, and with a defiant point, he declares that he will be the one to defeat him. His eyes burn with a manic, desperate energy. Tristan scoffs, calling his self-righteousness the excuse of a pathetic loser. But Hirotaka can only think of his miserable life, believing companions are just weak people using each other. And yet, even in his despair, he remembers that he was saved. Tristan seems to understand, admitting that everything he once held dear in this world is gone. But Hirotaka's mind flashes to his new friends, realizing that because of them, he was never truly alone. He stands tall, declaring that with his companions by his side, he can face anything. The simple, earnest declaration seems to catch the Demon King completely off guard, but the terror of the situation still registers on Hirotaka's face, and a single desperate question hangs in the air. How to make a contract with the demon sword. Jazella's voice explains that the process is simple. Just offer blood to the sword. He must stain the blade with his own blood and wish for its power to complete the contract. She floats over him, teasing that he's finally come around to her way of thinking. His hand tightens around the hilt, the weight of his decision clear. He thinks to himself that he doesn't want to be a demon king. He likes his simple life. But if this power is what he needs to protect the people he cares about, he closes his eyes, offering a silent apology to Lise and Rachel, because a kindness that can't protect anyone is completely worthless. And so, he decides to cast that kindness aside, asking Asoro to make him a demon king. A dark aura erupts around him as the transformation begins. Jazella floats in the air, her body wrapped in the dark energy of the contract. With a manic grin, she declares that the pact is now complete. The dark power surges, flowing into Hirotaka's body. He feels the immense energy coursing through him, changing him from the inside out. The transformation is violent, reshaping him into something new. And when it's over, he stands as the new Demon King of Sloth. He immediately clashes with Tristan, his newfound power meeting the Demon King's head-on. The Demon King of Wrath can only grin, thrilled by this sudden turn of events. But Hirotaka's eyes are cold, promising that nothing of his enemy will be left behind.